Hey guys! So I just wanted to provide you with some videos that you could use as a resource as you are working on your process paper this 6 weeks. I know it's been a really long time since we've been together, and it's been an even longer time since I've asked you to write an essay, let alone one that's a little bit longer than a typical timed write. So hopefully in these videos you will get an idea of the type of analysis that I'm looking for. So what I did in this video, we're going to go through a prompt and a passage from an old timed write that I used to give to sophomores, and then we're also going to look at how to construct just a very basic outline to kind of get you organized as you are writing. And so, yeah, let's do it. This prompt comes from a book called Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Obviously, in your paper that you are writing, you're going to have a slightly different prompt than what I have here as an example, and that's okay. I think that the sample that we're going to go through together in these videos is close enough to give you an idea of what you should be doing in your own paper. The other thing to remember is that your paper is about an entire novel, not just a passage. So I can't show you a video where I am like flipping through the pages of a book to find quotes. So instead, I'm just going to show you with a brief passage. When you write your own process paper, I do expect you to pull evidence from throughout the novel, not just one specific passage, because your character is more than likely going to change throughout your novel, right? They're not going to be just one-dimensional. At least, hopefully, you're choosing a more round character than that. All right. So this prompt says, in a well-developed essay, discuss how the use of diction, detail, imagery, syntax, and or figurative language helps to develop Hugo's opinion of the Thénardier family. All right, so I have taught you all year that when you get a prompt like this, a character analysis focusing on authors' devices and things like that, that we have two parts of our prompt. So let's go through and see what they are. The first part, and the thing that I have to organize my paper around, is the author's devices. So in this case, we have a few listed: diction, detail, imagery, syntax, and figurative language. And then the other part is, how does Hugo feel about the Thénardier family? Okay, so let's write that down here. We know we have two parts that we will have to answer throughout the entire essay. This is not just one and done where you're like, yes, the author uses metaphors or whatever, and then that's all you say about it. Or you only mention the second part of the prompt in your thesis, and then you don't bring it up again in your paper. You have to answer both parts of the prompt throughout your paper. So the first part is the devices. I've told you all year that you should be choosing two devices, because in a timed write setting, you know you only have 45 minutes. There's just not enough time to analyze more than that for most students. Now, because this is a process paper, meaning you have much longer to work on it, it is a process as we go throughout the weeks, you can absolutely do more than two devices if you choose to. But I would cap it at 3 if I were you. And I think personally, it works better with two devices, because then your paragraphs, you have two body paragraphs, and each is more developed. But because of everything that's going on, and because we haven't been practicing together face-to-face in class, I understand that writing these very long, well-developed analytical paragraphs might be a little bit difficult for some of you. And in that case, that's where I think writing 3 body paragraphs might be more beneficial to you, because then you don't have to write as much in each body paragraph. So I wrote 2 to 3 there to remind you. The second part we said was, how does Hugo feel about the Thénardiers? So Hugo's opinion of Thénardiers. Your prompt for your process paper is focusing on a character and how that character is developed through the author's devices or author style throughout the novel. So I do think this is very similar, because in this paper that we are going to practice with, I'm still going to have to discuss who the Thénardiers are, how they are characterized. Okay, so now we know what we are going to be discussing. in our paper. Let's get a little bit more specific and read the passage. All right, here we go. What were the Thénardiers? They belonged to that bastard class formed of low people who have risen and intelligent people who have fallen, which lies between the classes called middle and lower, and which unites some of the faults of the latter with nearly all the vices of the former, without possessing the generous impulses of the workman or the respectability of the bourgeois. They were of those dwarfish natures which, if perchance heated by some sullen fire, easily become monstrous. The woman was at heart a brute, the man a blackguard, both in the highest degree capable of that hideous species of progress which can be made toward evil. There are souls which crab-like crawl continually toward darkness, going back in life rather than advancing in it, using what experience they have to increase their deformity, growing worse without ceasing, and becoming steeped more and more thoroughly in an intensifying wickedness. Such souls were this man and this woman. To be wicked does not ensure prosperity, for the end did not succeed well. Okay, so I think even without background information, without context for this passage in this novel, I think we can all agree that it is very clear the Thénardiers are horrible people. They are very, very evil, greedy, wicked people. And because I think that is so clear-cut, I can tell that all of the diction in this passage is negative. And for that reason, because it seems to all work together, one of my two devices, I'm going to focus on diction. Remember, diction is specific word choice. So I'm just going to put word choice here to remind you. It is a little bit more than that, but for our purposes in this essay, diction is word choice. Why is the author choosing these specific words instead of other words? Why are they important? What kind of connotations do they have? Things like that. I've told you throughout the entire year that I do think diction is the easiest device for ninth graders to write about because it exists in whatever book you're reading, right? There are always going to be words. And so I absolutely think that if you are struggling, you don't know where to begin with your paper, begin with diction. There is something in your novel that will work for this one. So because that one is really easy, I also wanted to show you how to write about a more sophisticated, difficult device to discuss. I want you, though, to keep in mind, you do not have to do this. I just know that some of you might want to push yourselves a little bit and kind of stretch your abilities, see what you're capable of. And so for that reason, I am also going to discuss syntax in my sample paper here. Syntax very basically is sentence structure. Again, there's a little bit more to it, but for our purposes with this, it is sentence structure. So the length of the sentences, the punctuation, things like that. Again, if syntax is too difficult for you, and it probably is for most of you, that's totally okay. Pick something that you feel more comfortable with. If you feel okay using imagery or metaphor or juxtaposition or whatever, that's fine. Go with something you feel confident in. This is not a time for you to stress out any more than you need to, right? Choose things that will work with your abilities and with your novel. I just wanted to show you a little bit of a range, something easy and something maybe a little bit more difficult to discuss. Okay, so now we have these two devices which correspond to the first part of the prompt. Now we need to figure out the second part of the prompt, which is Hugo's opinion of the Thénardiers. Again, I think it's very cut and dry. It's very obvious that Hugo hates the Thénardiers. Right? Let me share. Hugo hates the Thénardiers. He thinks that they are evil. He thinks that they are just wicked. So I'm going to put down here so I remember. And most importantly, perhaps, I think it's clear that Hugo believes that people like the Thénardiers are incapable of redemption. They are irredeemable characters. And I'm going to try to spell this, but I don't. That looks wrong, but I think it's right. Okay, so we have figured out our prompt now. We know what we need to do. We have read our passage. We have our two parts of the prompt, and now it is time to take all of this information and to put it into an outline format. I highly recommend making yourself an outline, even if it is very basic, before you write your actual paper. It's going to keep you organized, and it's going to keep you managing your time efficiently. When I was in high school and college and having to write papers all the time, I was maybe a little too detail-oriented, a little too organized. I had all of my highlighters out, and I would have all my research color-coded, and I would have sticky notes that corresponded to my highlighter colors, and it was all very pretty and nice. I don't need you to do that necessarily. Just take a piece of paper and briefly sketch out the order that you want your paper to go in, and it will kind of give you a checklist as you are writing. So, the first thing in our outline we know is our introduction. And there are a couple parts to an introduction. The first being some sort of hook, if that's what you want to call it. Your first sentence. What are you going to do to draw the reader into your paper? We'll get to the introduction in the next video so you can see different ways that you could do this. Then I think it is important to provide some sort of context in your introduction. Background information, setting the scene, whatever. And then lastly is the most important part of your introduction, which is your thesis, right? This is the one that you have to have a very clear thesis because it organizes the rest of your paper for the reader. And that is me. And I would like to feel organized as I am reading your paper. In your introduction somewhere, I need you to include GATE. And if you don't remember, GATE is that little abbreviation for genre. That's not how you spell genre. Genre. There we go. It looks weird too. Author, title, and era. So I need that information somewhere in your introduction. I've told you all year that you can just place it in your thesis, and if that's where you feel the most comfortable, that's totally fine. But because you are writing a little bit more developed of an introduction this time, if that information gets placed in other sentences in the intro, that's totally okay too. I am going to show you perhaps a slightly different way to write a thesis than what we've been focusing on all year, because I have been giving you a formula, and that's fine for 9th grade. It's a really good training wheel to get you used to writing and including all the information that you need. But because we have almost moved on now to 10th grade, that formula isn't going to work anymore. So we'll get there in the next video. Okay, second paragraph is, of course, our body paragraph number 1. For me, that's going to be diction. For you, it might be something else. In our body paragraphs, I think that you need at least 3 pieces of text evidence. 3+ pieces of text evidence. And in this case, it does need to be cited, which I will show you how to do in one of the subsequent videos here. So 3+ pieces of text evidence. I will tell you, people who have more evidence, as long as it is just actually like commented on and analyzed, they tend to do a little bit better. If you are only looking at 1 or 2 pieces of text evidence per body paragraph, that's just not enough to accurately and fully, I guess, prove your assertion. Okay, so with that, I forgot, duh. Before that, let's just move this. No! Okay, whatever, we're just going to add it underneath. You have to have a topic sentence. And that should go before your evidence. Topic sentence is going to be like a mini thesis. And it introduces whatever you're talking about in that body paragraph. So in this case, it would be diction. Okay, once we have our 3 pieces of evidence, then we also need to make sure that we are thoroughly analyzing. And this comes in the form of commentary. So what makes your quotes important? Why do those words prove how the author feels about the characters? Okay, and then lastly, in each body paragraph, or at least in the first one, we need a transition sentence. I have not asked you to write transition sentences this year because they just aren't on the top of my priorities list, but I will show you how to do one here in this more formal process paper. Okay, third paragraph is body paragraph number 2. Which for me is syntax. For you, it will probably be something else. So everything is going to be the same. We still have to have a topic sentence. We still need to have at least 3 pieces of text evidence, and we need to have commentary to accompany that text evidence. The only difference is that I don't think that the second body paragraph, unless you are doing a third body paragraph, I don't think that the second one needs a transition, because what you write in as your final sentence of a body paragraph, the second body paragraph at least, should naturally lead in to the conclusion. Transition sentence, not as necessary. So I will show you mine, how I've written it. I just think that adding a transition to the conclusion would be clunky and unnecessary. If you feel like you need that, by all means, write a transition sentence. Okay, and then my last paragraph is going to be my conclusion. I have not really taught you how to write good conclusions this year, and that's okay. Even in this paper, I'm still not going to be nitpicky with your conclusion. A lot of people think that you need to restate your thesis in some way in your conclusion. That's fine if that's what you want to do. If you are going to do that, you need to do it in different words. It should not just be your thesis literally restated. You need to find synonyms. You need to change the sentence structure, whatever. I will do that in a way, and I will show you that. I also think that you should add some sort of broader statement, I guess, that could apply to multiple novels, not just the novel that you read. And in my conclusion, I also like to add a little bit more context, which would probably go up here. You don't have to, but I will show you how I wrote my conclusion for this. Again, your introduction and your conclusion are not the end-all, be-all of your grade for this. They are not the number one priority. I care much, much more about your body paragraphs in the analysis that you are providing of all of this text evidence. And how it supports your assertion in your thesis. So thesis and body paragraphs, those are the most important. Intro, conclusion, I really want you to try to push yourselves on this because it is the only process paper we've written all year, and now is your chance to show what you have learned. But if they still aren't the greatest, that's okay. All right, so I know what I have now. I know what I need to be doing in my paper. It is now time to go and look for some quotes. Okay, so I am going to first look for diction, and then I will look for syntax afterwards. Okay, what were the Thénardiers? They belonged to that bastard class formed of low people who have risen and intelligent people who have fallen, which lies between the classes called middle and lower, and which unites some of the faults of the latter with nearly all the vices of the former, without possessing the generous impulses of the workman or the respectability of the bourgeois. They were of those dwarfish natures, which, if perchance heated by some sullen fire, easily become monstrous. The woman was at heart a brute, the man a blackguard, both in the highest degree capable of that hideous species of progress which can be made toward evil. There are souls which, crab-like, crawl continually toward darkness, going back in life rather than advancing in it, using what experience they have to increase their deformity, growing worse without ceasing, and becoming steeped more and more thoroughly in an intensifying wickedness. Such souls were this man and this woman. To be wicked does not ensure prosperity, for the end did not succeed well. Okay, everything I've highlighted, I think I could very easily discuss in a body paragraph about diction. They're all very, very negative words, and especially some of them are very obvious: monstrous, deformity, hideous, wicked, all of those things. Okay, so I have a lot of quotes for diction. Now I have to look at syntax. And syntax is one of those devices where you aren't necessarily going to have a lot of quotes so much as you are an understanding of how the sentence structure works, the patterns that are found in a passage or in a book. So in this very, very short passage, there are 4 paragraphs, and it is kind of like framed, right? Our information, the bulk of our information comes in the middle 2 paragraphs, and that leaves this first paragraph, what were the Thénardiers, and the second paragraph, to be wicked does not ensure prosperity, for the end did not succeed well. Those frame the main part of this passage, and they're actually like very short sentences compared to the rest. This first one is a question, and we'll get back to this last one in a little bit here, because I do want to talk about the last sentence a little bit. Okay, the second paragraph is super interesting because the entire paragraph is only 1 sentence long. It is a very, very long, convoluted, difficult to understand sentence because it has all of these commas in it, right? So we have just an insane amount of punctuation in this 1 sentence. That is pretty rare. Authors don't normally write like that. Now, it's not rare for Hugo because he did write like that all of the time. In fact, in Les Miserables, there are hundreds of pages just written about the Parisian sewer system. So he is very long-winded. This is very typical of Hugo. But for most writing, it's not. This sentence is difficult to understand because he's adding in all of this punctuation. He has various phrases and clauses. And so by the time you get to the end of this paragraph, the end of this sentence with the word bourgeois, you tend to forget what was even at the beginning of the paragraph because it was that long-winded. It was that convoluted. So that has to be important, right? Could he break up this information into separate sentences and make it easier to understand? Absolutely he could, but he didn't. And so we have to think about why. Why is that important? He did it for a reason. What could that emphasize to us? What could that mirror for us? The second paragraph does have more individual sentences, but it still has a pretty crazy amount of punctuation, right? And it's all kinds of punctuations. We have commas, there's a semicolon, here's a regular colon, right? So I just want to mark all of these things so that I can remember as I'm writing what I'm looking at. Here we go. I think that's everything. Oops, there we go. All right. So I have marked all of the punctuation in these 2 paragraphs. It's a lot. It's probably too many commas, and I love commas. So again, we need to think about why Hugo is doing this. Okay, on to the last sentence, and why I think this sentence is important and kind of interesting. So I said we've had a question mark, and we've had commas and periods and semicolons and colons, but in the last sentence we have this dash. The dash is my favorite punctuation mark, if that's a thing, and it's a really, really interesting punctuation mark to me because it functions like a comma, right? It allows for a pause, or it allows for additional information, but in this case I think dashes make whatever comes after them much more final. It seems that it's more emphasized. It makes whatever comes after the dash seem pretty important. And so as I'm writing, I need to think about that. Why is he using this dash here? It seems that he really loves the comma. Why not just go with a comma? He made the conscious decision to use a dash. So I need to think about why that is important. Okay, so we have gone through the prompt, we've gone through the passage, we have come up with a very, very brief outline just to kind of remind ourselves as we're writing of what we need in each body paragraph. Yeah, so if you would continue watching my videos, I will also show you how I wrote my introduction and thesis for this prompt and passage. I'm going to walk you through a couple body paragraphs over diction and syntax, and then I will also show you what I would do with a conclusion for this type of paper. So I hope you found this helpful, and I will see you in the next video.